Hi there, it's Felicia. I am your host of Own It for Good. And today I'm going to be talking a little bit about the concept of being the master architect or carpenter in your own life. And I've got a few notes today, so if you hear any rustling of paper or are seeing that, depending on if you're watching or listening, that's what's going on. So I took a few notes today. I put a lot of thought and time into it. Not that I don't always do it, but I don't always take such detailed notes and really write, things out. So I'm trying just a little bit different, I guess, technique or approach today, which actually is what I'm going to be talking about in general. And this is part of being and seeing yourself as the architect, your life architect. And when we think about what an architect is, and I'm going to use this whole analogy of how this relates, to, as you're building and designing your life, well, that's what the job of a chief or a head architect or a lead architect is to do. They're in charge of the overall building project from design, hiring all of the subcontractors potentially, or maybe they're just hired to do that. But they've got to really think about and learn what the owner of that future property and building, what are they going to use it for? Where is the building located? What kind of conditions does it need to be, ready to handle? Is it going to be residential, commercial? There's a lot that goes into what an architect has to do when they're planning and designing a project. And even if we also, so I'll kind of interchangeably talk about, the high level of an architect and even down also to the master builder or carpenter that might be also working in conjunction with that architect on that building. So, but in order for each of those to get to that point in their careers, they had to have a start. They were beginners at one point or apprentices. So they might have studied under somebody to learn their craft or trade. So if we think about a life as an architecture project, and we are then the architects, we really should be pretty thoughtful about what kind of life do we want to live? What does a day in the life look like? What is the purpose? What are you doing? How are you relating to your environment? There's a lot that needs to go into that. But most of us just walk around kind of on autopilot, don't we? And we might not have had the best teachers or role models. We didn't go to architecture school. We just watched our parents or maybe, other family members, maybe people in our church or community or teachers, depending on where you came from and who your teachers were. And, we're just monkey see, monkey do. And that's not always the best learning environment for a purpose-filled, intention-filled life, And this, before I go any further with that analogy and even saying that, this is not to say that my parents, your parents weren't wonderful people. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't, but they were probably doing the best that they could. So this is not a judgment on the type of people they are, but it just the approach to living life in general. And I think most of us are, have not been taught to think about life this way. You just get a job, you pay your bills, you buy a house, you have 2.2 kids, have a car. We're just living kind of day to day, which is very much the mindset that I was in. And again, there's nothing necessarily wrong with this. I just kind of woke up one day, and if you're listening to me, you've probably done the same thing, where you were like, is this all there is to life? Maybe feeling a little tired. Maybe you're living in complete reaction mode if you're a mom, or maybe a spouse, or in a job that's very demanding. And maybe you're doing some things in your off time outside of work or responsibilities. Let's use the word responsibilities that are maybe that feel good, that are pleasurable, but maybe are not like life-giving. And if you've, my personal story is that I found myself kind of totally checked out, overweight, not in great shape. I was enjoying wine almost every evening, 2 to 3 glasses. It had worked its way up to that. And that was like my version of self-care. I really thought I was enjoying it. Like, I guess I was enjoying it, but I definitely wasn't enjoying the consequences. I was enjoying the wine itself and that moment, the hour when I would, give myself permission to watch whatever TV show that I wanted to watch, sit down on the couch, stop all my responsibilities. So there was a lot that was tangled up in that habit. And there, I was also simultaneously sort of eating a lot of my feelings. And I've been doing that since I was a really young child. I had a lot of trauma, not physical abuse trauma, but just life events trauma. And I learned that, things tasted good and they made me feel better when everything else in my life was chaos. I could rely on my, I was going to pull a book off my bookshelf real quick, but actually my iPhone right now is sitting on a stack of books. Like, I'm surrounded by books. So that was sort of my little wall of like my little safe place that I created for myself as a child. And my little sanctuary was a good book and maybe a good snack or 3. And that would include books too. Like, literally you could find me inside of a book. That's where I could escape to another world. But enough about that. And so what does it mean? So before I dive too much further back into the architect analogy, I want to talk just at a high level of how the analogy is going to work, and then we'll kind of get into the nitty-gritty. But an architect or a builder has to use tools and systems and processes to get their job done. So tools are they're there to help make things easier to, whether it's at the architecture or design level, maybe there's, a CAD program, computer aided design, that, or there's drafting tools, there's math as a tool. There's all of these things that an architect can employ, and maybe they even have to go to the site where the building is going to be built. They have to survey. They need to know the weather conditions of that particular area. There's a lot that goes into it, and a lot of different tools that a builder or an architect can use when, designing the right thing, and then utilizing down to the smallest level of detail the tools. So let's apply that to life. If we're talking about designing a life and doing it very intentionally. And it occurred to me too, as I was doing this analogy, that even when you put a title on something, that brings some levity and seriousness to it, right? And even some self-accountability. So for example, and you'll find this actually with a lot of tools. They might give their program a name. Actually, mine, Own It for Good. So Own It for Good is a system or a tool. Now, for me, it might be my overall architecture and design that I'm going to use. So it might be a little bit more than a tool for me, but for you, it really may be a tool. And I'm in some other communities like Sober Sis and what is another one that I'm in right now? Destiny Collective, where, but those are tools in an overall part of my life where I'm working on and designing, which is faith, making sure that I'm, staying accountable to being alcohol free, because that is a part of my overall weight loss. I'm using a tool called Lose It, which is a weight loss app. These are all examples of tools and systems. So, but I am the architect that as I'm using these tools, I'm learning not only more about how to use the tool, but how I interact with it and how it works in my plan. So I'm married to the overall plan or design of the building that I'm working on, but I'm not married to the tools that I'm using. So maybe that's kind of a good little kind of intermediary concept to use in there. So there are skills that we use also in this overall analogy. And our skills are the ability to maybe come in and assess the situation, knowing what's needed. For an experienced architect, they may have experience. For the more novice or apprentice architect, they may have to run it by a committee or a lead architect first. But they're still beginning to learn the skill just by going in and doing what they're taught, but they have to build up their experience, and experience will also be a teacher, and time. So time, techniques, experience, tools, and then knowing how to select the right tool and based on the job. And again, a lot of this is experience too, but this is why being part of a community, like the Own It community, or or having a coach or a therapist or a teacher, or really using, a lot of books out there actually are manuals. So, but most of us just consume them and then really don't dissect them and apply them the way the authors intend. But that's some of the most cost-effective ways that you can sort of be an architect in your own life, and the tools that you can use to help you further select tools and systems. So as I was even thinking about this a little bit, I wanted to make the comparison of, or another further analogy. Yes, I love analogies because my mind does work in pictures, and I think a lot of people's do. But when you, let's take the example of like modern furniture. You can go to Walmart today and buy, and I did this recently for my college student. I bought a very inexpensive coffee table. I didn't want to spend a lot of money buying a quality piece of furniture that was going to go into a dorm room with boys. It needed to serve a purpose to maybe hold a drink on, and knowing that it was not going to be something that I wanted to hang on to or that would be well taken care of. And the quality and the process and even the tools and the materials that get used to build a table that's sold at Walmart is very different than a coffee table that maybe is built to be a very high-end heritage piece, or a statement or a design piece. The materials are different, the purpose is different, the tools are going to be different, and the intent. So, all of these things work together. And a lot of us, quite frankly, are living Walmart lives, Walmart coffee table lives. And we are intended for so much more. And I'm going to bring in a little bit of my faith here now because it just seems appropriate. But from my worldview as a Christian, I believe that God, created us. And did God intend for me to live a Walmart life? I mean, he gave me free will, so I get to do that. but is that really his intent? And that's sort of I think a lot of us come to this crossroads in, at some point in life where we kind of stop and maybe think about this. And some of us may go, oh, that's too big. I don't want to think about that. I don't even know what to do about that thought. And we might just go back to sleep. But I decided to wake up and stay awake. But that was a process in and of itself too, and maybe another story for another day. But I did finally get kind of tired of being tired, and tired of just being on that hamster wheel of like doing the same habits that were giving me the same consequences that I didn't like. But I liked the habits in the moment because they were a quick fix in the moment that day. And it just seemed too overwhelming and too big to fix and tackle. Plus, when you have habits like that are tied to literally consumption, and where emotions are tied to it and all of that, it's a mess to sort of untangle. But it is doable. So that's what I'm here to tell you. And I'm so passionate about it now that, I switched, directions in my career, and I'm doing this. So and here, like right now, I'm telling you, if I can do this, and I also use the Enneagram in my program. And for those of you that are familiar with this, I am an Enneagram 9. And if I can wake up and stay awake and do this, anybody flipping can. So if there's hope for anybody. For those of you that don't, I'm going to take a little detour right now. Those of you that don't know what the Enneagram is, let me just give you a really quick peek into what I just said there. Or what does that mean? What is she talking about? The Enneagram is a personality system, and it's broken down into 9 types, really like 27, but 9 main types. And the 9 is the overall is a peacemaker. And they talk about with each number, excuse me, there is a shadow side. There's a virtue, or like what you can be if you're healthy, and then sort of your shadow side, which is your average to unhealthy version and what you're prone to. And as a 9, I am prone to sloth. So when I was just talking about some of my struggles with checking out, with eating and drinking, it kind of makes sense. And there was a lot of napping in there too for a few years. Excuse me, I have to cough. So anyway, back to my Walmart analogy versus the heritage piece. So if you zoom back out and look at, and maybe even have sort of I fast forwarded my life a few years and kind of imagined myself on my deathbed. Honestly, death can be a very good teacher. And I kind of thought to myself, what am I doing here? Am I treating my life like a Walmart table, or am I treating it like it's something that was hand built with love, with maybe some dovetail joints and high quality wood, and like all that care and attention that would last for generations? Yeah. And I made this analogy up today, so I didn't actually use that analogy but I'm kind of doing that version of that today. So anyway, I really wanted to live a life that was bigger than just me. I did really start thinking generationally, and there is a lot of alcoholism in my family. And while I was not an alcoholic, at least not yet, I was definitely trying to do some catching up to that standard. I definitely didn't want that to be my legacy. And then also at the time I had teenagers in my house. So I really, I was wanting to tell them things like, don't drink. And yet they were watching me role model the opposite every night. So, and and that just wasn't okay with me. I no longer, and my own curiosity got the better of me as well, because I was starting to join some online community groups and starting to fork over a little bit of money to participate in like these 30-day, alcohol-free challenges, or even diet programs, and or lifestyle, whatever words you want to use. And so I was starting to really hear people talk about that it was possible and that life was amazing if you just stuck with it and did and so I was started getting really curious, and I just said, you know what? I finally, about 2 years ago, when you're watching this, it's the fall of 2021, I finally said, you know what? Let's just go for it. And that was 2 years ago. So I did that in the fall of 2019. And I said, let's just go for it. All of these bad habits are still going to be there waiting for you. If you want to go back to using these tools as a way to live life, and that's more fun, then go for it. But at least you'll know. That was sort of the gist of my sort of internal conversation. It's like, the time is going to pass anyway. And at this point, I had been a yo-yo drinker now for about a year, on again, off again, on again. And I thought, let's just stop playing around with this, and let's just see if what these people are talking about is true. I wanted to see for myself. I wanted to have the experience. And I kind of reassured myself, I calmed down. That was one of the tools I used, was just reassuring myself that it's going to be okay. Alcohol, they weren't going to stop making wine in the next few months. They weren't going to stop making macaroni and cheese or any of those things. Actually, I didn't address the food right away. I just focused on one thing at a time. And that is another good thing to think about in this analogy is, that a house or a structure doesn't get built all at once. They've got to lay the foundation. You've got to measure. Everything's got to be ready. And then the main supporting structures go up. And then, maybe a roof goes in. And so, it does it layer by layer. And then even in that point, they've got to even work with other experts to make sure that they put in things like electric and plumbing, so it's so that it all gets done in the correct order within a time frame. So there's a project management thing happening here. And then the details don't get filled in till later. But a lot of times that's what we see when we look at other people or even hear sales pitches. It's like we see the finished product and we don't realize all that went into it, even from the master person that designed it and the expertise and the time that it took to go into it. So that is the difference in the approach with, like somebody like me and coaches that I work with, and then people that work with me, as a coach, is I am all about let's, the old adage, measure twice, cut once. Like, let's do this right. And that's not perfect, because perfection will trip you up. That is a mindset that I was stuck in. It was like this all or nothing. And I would focus on the tool. So this is where we want to be really careful in this analogy. I didn't have that bigger mindset of an architect. I was getting focused in on the tools. So for example, one of the things that I tried before I did this new approach that I now call Own It, one of the things I did was some different Beachbody programs. And there are great programs, so this is not a slam against Beachbody at all. But, there was a program like called the 21-Day Fix, I think it was. And it, I've tried Weight Watchers. I tried even just on my own, not drinking alcohol, but without learning and having additional tools, like learning the science behind it. What was it doing to my body so that would help me want something differently. Like, I don't want to hurt myself. Learning about nutrition so that it makes me want to do something different versus now. And that's a tool that works for me. I have seen, it doesn't always make sense to me, but I do see where science doesn't help people. They don't want to know that overwhelms them. It's too much, So that's where they get to be the architect in their life, and they learn that science may not be a tool for them. For me, it's a critical one. But I was very much focused on the tool and doing it this certain way versus, this bigger goal that I have is to lose X number of pounds. I gave myself sort of a general time frame of, well, my hope overall is to have it done within 3 years, or by the time I turn 50. And when you're watching this, I've got, 8 more months to go. So anyway, where I wanted to lose weight and just be healthier was my overall goal, to be a healthy weight. And I know what my, height is, and, so I can do the math to know generally what that should look like for me based on my bone structure, my height, my weight, my age, and having realistic expectations too. Like if I looked at somebody and saw 6-pack abs and the, thong butt bikinis out there and said, oh, I want to do that by the time I'm 50. Like, really? Like, that's probably all that they do all day. And they probably eat only chicken breasts and broccoli and have to work out 6 hours a day. Like, when you really look at the people that you see in bodybuilding competitions. So that's another part of this, like looking at when you look at the plan, like when I was talking about the analogy of the purpose of the building. What do you want it to do? What is going to be the goal? What do you want a day in the life to look like? Well, I don't want a day in the life to look like 6 hours at the gym. So I'm okay with having maybe a little midlife, softness. I don't know, let's call it that. And, and just being a healthy weight. My overall goal is body freedom, to really sit with myself and think like an architect would when they're designing something. That's what you have to do with your life. For me personally, I want to be able to travel. I really love to hike. I love being in trees and in nature. So I want to be able to wake up on a Saturday morning and on a whim say, you know what, I'd love to go hike a mile, uphill today and get to the top of a vista. I live in Kentucky right now, and we've got some really beautiful places, and even caves, being able to handle a climb and a hike and physical exertion, I want to be able to do that. I want my knees to be able to bend. I want to be able to, get in, crisscross applesauce pose on the floor and be able to get back up without, it being a huge ordeal. I want to wear some jeans and feel good in them and not have the buttons in the waist dig into me because, I've got the whole muffin top thing going on. Like things like that. Really, what do I want a day in the life to look like? For me, I want, to be able to, walk an hour or two with my dogs on a daily basis. I want to sleep well. I want to work. I want to coach. I want to do things like this, like producing videos. So I need my brain to be clear. I want to have a good relationship with my kids and have plenty of time for them. Like all of this, it doesn't just automatically happen. It takes attention and time, and thoughtfulness, and also a willingness to try different things. So, anyway, going back to being an apprentice and or a novice when you're new, you may only be able to use basic skills and do basic things. Picking up a hammer, hitting a nail. And we also need guides, teachers, coaches. Well, I think you need those at every stage, honestly. But particularly when you're a novice, like you need to have your work checked. You need to stop and go ask questions, that kind of thing. And that is where, all the resources, make sure you have good resources in your corner. And as we get more experienced and skilled, we may be able to, take it up a notch, literally. Like, oh, I could see maybe there's more than one type of hammer out there. Did you know that? There are. And even different types of specialty nails and screws out there. Or maybe you're even have graduated from a simple hammer and nail to a screwdriver, maybe even power tools. So that's what we also need to do in our own journeys, and as we're building a life. Like, don't get stuck with, well, I'm just using a hammer and I'm, like, expand your toolbox, pay attention, track things, this is where journaling and tracking are like essential tools that no one should leave home without or leave their morning without, and your evening, like a morning check-in and a morning and an evening check-in, and even a midday if you have time. So anyway, about 2 years ago, I did go all in with this, wanting to tackle this, as I just kind of alluded to. And this is where I really, like, when I say all in, I mean like all in. Like, I knew I had played around enough with things, I had used my basic hammer enough to know that I was like, okay, I need to go all in and learn what it means to be an architect in my own life. So I'm going to go all in. I'm going to learn what they tell me to learn. I'm going to learn all the tools. I'm going to be open. I'm going to be teachable. I am going to practice. I'm going to be willing to be patient, having realistic expectations, being honest, like all of these things that are also tools in the toolbox, but they're big, important mind shifts too. And like, for example, in the beginning of when I decided that I really wanted to go alcohol free for a significant period of time, and I set a year goal, and here I am 2 years later, like, still completely alcohol free, don't even want it. But that was not the original intent or the goal that I had. Like, I set what I thought was a big goal at the time, and it is a big goal. But I didn't start, I had to chunk it down and start where I was. The first week, if you're a daily drinker and you're listening to this, like, that's hard, to go without your, something that you're used to in your routine. That is just part of it, part of your day. So one of my biggest tools in the beginning was alcohol-free drinks. And even the process of like researching them and finding them and getting excited and even looking for recipes, like, that gave my mind a focus. So instead of being focused on, oh, I don't get to have this thing, it was shifting to, I do, look at what I get to have. It was a whole different, like, it was a big, important tool for me, and one that, I talk to people about. And this is a tool that when you get to it and you're ready to tackle, or maybe you're coming to this going, I don't have a drinking problem, but man, I sure have an ice cream problem. So this would be something that you can also do with food, and you might narrow in to something very specifically that you're willing to start with first. One thing, ice cream. And what could you get excited about instead? You could explore the world of fruit. You could explore the world of different sweeteners and alternatives to dairy if you're trying to cut out dairy. or even in, so that would give your brain a big focus of, instead of a deprivation mindset, you're now like excited about something new. So that's a tool. But it's one, now that I'm 2 years alcohol free, I don't even think about it anymore. I'm fine with water. Like I rarely, occasionally when I'm out to dinner or out to lunch, and especially if I'm with my husband and he still drinks, I might have an alcohol-free beer, especially when it's with certain types of food that seem like beer food to me. Yeah. So I still have things where those mindsets still show up. I'm not too worried about them because I've got a mindset of a long game. Like this is my career. This is like who I am as an architect of life. Like I'll get there. I'm just doing one skill at a time, one thing at a time. I'm still building. I feel like I've got a fairly good foundation. I'm with the alcohol and with what I consume and put in my pie hole. So I'm working on the food piece now, and that foundation's getting pretty good. I'm on a downward trajectory now. Food's a little more tricky because you have to eat. You can't just abstain. But again, a lot of the tools that I learned and practiced and got experienced with and skill with in my alcohol-free journey, I now get to like slide over and use in my weight loss journey. And then even when I get to the next leg of my journey, which is ramping up the fitness, then I will, keep, sliding skills over, tools over, trying things, but not being married to the tools. When they stop working or when I don't need them anymore, or I graduate to a, more sophisticated tool as my skill and experience level develops. So hopefully you're following me on this analogy. So we just need to keep the overall, and that's why it's always important to revisit your, with the Own It acronym, it's done for you, outcome. You've got your outcome always in your mind, and you're always revisiting it. And again, the Own It framework is on the macro level and it's on the micro level. So on the daily basis, what is it you want to work on? Or maybe you can even chunk it down into weeks or months. So as you're working on your big O, your big outcome, which for me was like 70 pounds-ish, and a general kind of fitness level, being able to do those hikes and do different things, that body freedom that I want. So that's my overall big goal. Well, the first thing was alcohol. It's hard to lose weight if you're drinking. And usually when you are a frequent drinker, it even changes the chemistry in your body and changes the food that you crave. So you tend to crave more processed foods, things that you can get energy from real quickly. But anyway, I digress. So so that is, for me, when I think about the purpose of my life and the day in the life of Felicia, I want to do my coaching and build my business. I want to walk my dogs. I want to have good relationships with my kids and connecting time with them and my husband and my extended family. And that's a good day for me. I've got a good morning routine. I spend some time with Jesus and doing my devotionals. I like to eat good food, nutritious. I like to have enough time to think about having more nutritious food now, time to track my food. I take time to do all of these things and really think about this kind of stuff on the regular basis and keeping this overall outcome. Now, if I ever decide to run a marathon, then, I might need to change some things. The nutrition would definitely need to be dialed in a little bit more in my tracking. And of course, the time I spent in fitness would shift. And then I would have to kind of look and see how all of that would work together. And, that's where you start building the skills along with the tools and experience as you move into this lifestyle of being more conscious, and I wish there were a word for that, because I think once you give titles to something, now within the sober cis community, we call it sober-minded living. Brene Brown calls it wholehearted living, but it's, this intentional way of living versus, sort of the default autopilot, just letting life happen versus you happening to life. So where am I now? So anyway, so you go through a period of experimentation and trying. So there's a mindset shift here of just being open, being teachable, experimenting, really paying attention to what's working. If Weight Watchers is working for you now, great. But again, don't be married to a tool. Be married to the overall process. And if Weight Watchers, and I'm just throwing that out there as an example, is not working for you anymore, don't just say, well, I can't lose weight. No, that's not true at all. And that is the biggest overall mindset shift, like that went for me. It was like, oh, well, if this tool doesn't work, it must not work at all. Like the whole, like it's not possible for me. Versus really leaning into it and saying, you know what? I think this is possible for me. And I'm going to claim it. I'm going to stake it and I'm going to claim it and I'm going to figure it out until I figure it out. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, so I had to let go of the fear of changing tools and start to see that I'm the one doing the work and not the tools. The tools are not the thing doing the work. There's somebody that is using the tool. So the big difference. And this is the thing that leads to success. It's the person using the tool and even knowing when to put a tool down or when to even revisit a tool that they put down and maybe they need to go grab again. And that it was the showing up and using, and that they have command of the tools. They put the hours and the work and the labor into it. A tool is just there to make the job easier. So when you're using the right tool in the right application, then you will most likely have success. And if you've had success with something and then you stop having success with something, don't blame it on the tool. You put the tool down and reach for a new tool. And maybe sometimes we just need to try different. Instead of trying, what oftentimes, and a lot of us have been taught this, is that we just try harder. And then that creates the shame and the guilt and like, oh, something's wrong with me. And that's what can really start to trip people up. Oh, I'm not good enough. I can't do this. Versus, no, it's just, that's a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. And we'll talk about that maybe on another episode. So just be patient and remember that sometimes, especially if you're new to this, again, I can't stress that enough. Like, be patient, trust the process. So if you're new at something, expect it to be new. Like a lot of us, I think, just our expectations are crazy. And then that's when we get on the hamster wheel of, oh, I'm going to lose 10 pounds in 30 days and say I have success with something. And we focus on the tool that we used. And maybe it was an Atkins diet or, whatever. And then we think, oh yeah, Atkins works for me. Well, if it really worked for you, wouldn't the 10 pounds have stayed off? And instead, many of us spend 10 years losing and gaining the same 10 pounds. You know what I'm saying? How about let's lose the 10 pounds or whatever it is for you. For me, it's a little bit more than that. I want to lose it and keep it off. I want to be the person that doesn't even have to think about it anymore. It's just who I am to eat a certain way. It's never a battle. It's never a deprivation or like, I don't get to have this. I have to eat this over here and I have to do this and poor me. That is not the kind of life I'd want. I would much rather be fat and happy than skinny and walking around miserable and deprived all the time. But I'm here to tell you that with this approach, with the own it approach and thinking of yourself as the architect, that there is another way. There is a way to get what you want and have what you want be what you want. Does that make sense? And not something that you're constantly feeling divided over or deprived of the tasty thing over here, or the habit that you used to have, and oh yeah, I don't have it anymore. But that's that concept of like white knuckling your way through things. Like, I'm gonna do it, but it's gonna be hard, but I'm gonna do it. But you're not internally like happy about it. It's not who you are. When you like own it, and then you do the deeper work of changing the neural pathways, which takes time. It's, that laying of the foundation, building the structure in the walls, like, so it stays like it's a solid, structure that's going to last for generations, and that your children can rely on, or your loved ones, whoever, if you're married, or, I don't want to assume everybody out there is, married with kids like me, but whoever it is that is relying on you, that you care about and that you want to leave a legacy for. Maybe it's a charitable organization or your church, or, whatever. That can, that's something to fight for and to live for and to do this deeper work for. So we want to make sure that success comes from learning how to use the tools and letting go of tools that no longer work for you. Success comes from the willingness to bring new tools into your life when you're ready for them. It also comes from not having to make your identity the tool. I talked about that already. That you are not married to the tool. You're married to the outcome of what you want. And then that allows you flexibility with systems and processes and tools and skills, that you can apply. So that is, so even if you are currently like, some people can turn the way they eat and even the way they drink or don't drink into like almost like a religion or ideology. And even as somebody who, quote, is alcohol free now, I don't even like to call myself a non-drinker. Like, I do drink. I drink lots of things. When I lose weight and I change my way of eating, I don't call myself a non-eater. So I'm not tied to one. And as far as even programs out there for if you're here because you want to learn more about being alcohol free, or you are here because you want to just get healthier like I do, and just alcohol was the tip of that iceberg. For some of you, alcohol is the iceberg, and maybe you're happy with your weight, but maybe you're, whatever the case is, don't be married to the tool. So AA is not the only way. And even there's a lot of programs that are popping up out there. Like, just be open and whatever flow, and eat the fruit and spit out the seeds, as one of my friends, Gina, loves to say. So anyway, again, this is what I believe, what I have, downloaded from the Lord, with this acronym or the system, the Own It for Good. It allows you to, it's just that it's that bigger framework. It's not, and it allows you to use different tools within it, because we're looking at the broad concepts of owning it. But there are a lot of good, self-responsibility programs out there. So for you, it may be just a tool. You can take part of it, but it does allow you, but it's a system and a process. And I'm going to tell you to experiment, and I'm going to give you a buffet of tools to try. The Enneagram is one. It's one that works for me. Some people cannot stand the Enneagram or any kind of personality system. Fine, don't use it. So that's why I don't even call myself specifically an Enneagram coach, because I can still help you even if you don't care about the Enneagram. So anyway, a lot of different things, and reading, Oh, wait a minute. Sorry. Lost my place in my notes. So anyway, I want to wrap up here. I want to encourage you to just hang in there. And those of you, if you're wherever you are in your journey, maybe you're further along in one leg of the journey, but now you're at the beginning of the next leg, like me, or you're at the very beginning going, I'm so overwhelmed, I don't know what to do. Then, you know, just there is hope for you. You are in this mindset shift of seeing yourself as an architect and a master carpenter. You get to design your life. That's pretty empowering. That's pretty awesome. And every master carpenter started as a novice and an apprentice. And so it takes time. It takes time. It takes skill. So don't get too stuck in your ways. A lot of this, even one of the tools, is questioning your beliefs and learning how to think differently. If you only use a hammer and a screwdriver would work better, but you're the hammer girl, then and why would you ever use another tool? Well, that's where we can get stuck. We want to be smart enough to, and big picture thinking enough to think beyond the hammer and know that there's a range, there's a whole toolbox out there for us to use. And we just have to open it, and we just have to learn, how to use those. So I'm really, I'm so overflowing with gratitude right now. I've even found myself crying in the last few days. I am so grateful to God, for my faith in myself, and and the courage that I had when I was feeling so low and so defeated and so overwhelmed, but somehow seeing and knowing that it was within me to do this change. And I was the one that had to do it. Nobody was coming to do it for me. If it was going to happen, I had to step up and own it. I had to become the architect in my own life. And man, and again, if I can do it, anybody could do it. But you have to want to do it. And for me, the first thing that I had to do and kick to the curb was drinking less wine. And I never predicted that 2 years later I would still be alcohol free. That wasn't even a goal of mine. But once I got in and really understood what I wanted for my life, and if I really wanted it for good, like for it to be resolved and to not have to deal with this anymore, that I really didn't want it anymore. And that is, I'm free now. I'm free from that. And I love the little bit of taste of freedom that I have now, and I want more of it. And I want that for you too. I want you to be free. I want you to be free to live whatever life it is that God has put the desire in your heart to. I was listening to something today, and they said the word, and I need to verify this, but I do believe I think it's true, that the word desire itself is of the sire, of the master. So he has planted a desire in your heart, and that means it's possible. It's already happened. You just have to believe it enough to step up and own it. So owning it that's the other little nugget that I just want to leave you with, because own it can be, it is about self-responsibility and self-agency, but it's not all about us, and it's not only up to us. This is actually about stepping up and co-creating life with God. He gives us the gift of life, and we can give back to him. The life that we live can be a gift back to him. And isn't that a beautiful thing? Isn't that something worth being an architect of? All right, I'm going to have to cut myself off here. So feel free to reach out for me anytime. You can find me online at ownitforgood.com, ownitforgood.com, or on Facebook, Felicia Holmes, Felicia Bishop Holmes. I also have just started a new online community for my fellow, for Own It adventurers. Because life really is an adventure when you step up and own it and you design it. It's a self-designed adventure with God at the helm. And we're all doing the best we can, so there's no judgment here. Like, it wasn't that long. Like, I'm a newbie. I'm a novice at this. But I am excited. I am passionate, and I am learning the skills. And I know that I can help you also own it. So life is an adventure. It's an adventure. And I'm excited to open my eyes almost every day. And it's now full of joy and possibility. And it can be for you too. Peace out.